Hey everyone! Today I'm happy to present RONDO, a new tool from Needle for making elaborate glassware and ceramics designs. This is a web-based tool which uses NURBS, which is a curve representation, to allow you to intuitively and smoothly design surfaces. There's a variety of presets to choose from for various different styles of glassware, and also some ceramics designs like this one here, with little cracks on the surface and a nice coating on top. In this video, I'm going to walk you through how you use RONDO, what kind of designs you can make with it. First, we're going to start with an empty preset here. And this gives us a cylinder, basic cylinder shape, but it's already made out of glass. So the most important part in RONDO is this interface here, where you have little dots connected to handles. These dots here are control points. And when you drag on them, you can adjust the shape of the surface. And you can see that multiple of these control points control how the surface flows in between. The handles that are to the side of the control points control the thickness of the material at a specific point. You can see that when I drag this, both the color of the surface as well as how it refracts the light change in real time. And this is because we have made the surface thicker at this point, so more of the light entering the glass gets absorbed and attenuated inside of the glass, leading to this colored effect. We can change the color of this attenuation on the left hand side here. So for example, we can turn this into a green bluish attenuation color. And you can see that when we make walls thinner or thicker, we can adjust where this color is affecting the surface. RONDO makes this process of exploring different thicknesses of surfaces and how it affects the glass material and how it affects the final design super intuitive and easy, which is the main reason why we started with this. This is easier than if you do it in any other software. So let's design some real thing. Let's make a wine glass. Oh, and we can use these handles to define the basic shape of our glass, make it thinner here, add a couple more control points. And to close this bottom to get like a flat surface, we have extra toggles in the UI here. So we can tell it to close and flatten the bottom of the glass. And what this does is it adds some constraints to these control points here, so that you can't move them off this plane anymore. So it's now constrained to be a flat surface. You can see that even when we move these splines into a wine glass shape, it's still not thin enough in the middle. And that's because we don't have enough control points here. You can either add new control points via the profile option here. So you can click on add point and then insert new ones, which of course you can also remove again in the same way. Or you can right click on a point and select sharpen. And that does effectively the same thing. It adds two new control points right next to it, which in turn sharpens the surface at this point. There's also the reverse operation. You can soften the curve again, and that will basically remove the two surrounding points. Now that we have our basic shape, we can start adjusting the thickness of these various surfaces. And for this, we can use the handles and focus on the inner green line, which is basically the inner profile of our glass. Sometimes you end up with the handles being a little bit weird and all twisted. And for this, we introduced a button here, Align Handles to Surface, that just moves them into good starter positions again. And from there, you can easily use them to adjust how thick or thin the surface is at all these points here. And you can already see that when we drag these handles here, we get a nice colorization here from the thickness of the material. Let's make the walls here rather thin. And you'll also notice that RONDO makes it super easy to create these end joins of the spline of the shape that defines your glass. So usually if you're working with Blender or Maya or so on, this is something you have to create manually, like you would offset your spline and then you add these end pieces to it. Rondo does that automatically. So you can see that when I adjust the thickness on this top part here, it automatically introduces a nice arc and makes this into a round end. You can even control that. There's some settings for the joint shape here. So for example, we can adjust the radius. So we can make this like a very small radius and then a flat piece. And we can also adjust the height. So we can make this very steep or almost flat, depending on what kind of design you're looking for. You can also bevel the edges instead, which gives you this angular surface, where you can also use this slider to adjust just how far up it goes. So let's make a round shape again. And for a wine glass, you probably want a rather thin edge at the top here. If you want to look at your final design, you can always turn off show profile here. And so we only have the glass. We can also play with some of the surface options here. For example, the overall thickness of the glass. And you can see that when I move this thickness slider all the way to the left, this almost looks like a soap bubble. It looks like a very thin surface, and it's called a thin-walled material. And it basically looks like two very thin glass panes without much thickness, without much material in between them. So, and what we want for a glass like this is probably to turn the thickness up a bit so that we get these nice refractions, we get this cool shape here. We can also adjust the attenuation distance, which means how far has light to travel through the glass before it gets tinted. And you can change this for like artistic effect here. So how strongly do you want this glass to be affected? And we can also adjust the roughness of the glass material itself. So we can make it like milky glass here. And you can see it still has sharp reflections on top, which come from the coating. And this is something you'll find in commercial glassware as well. Often, even if you have like milky glass like this, you'll still have a reflective coating on top. Once we have our final design, we can then download it via the export option here. And that will give us a GLB file with our new glass. Rondo is live now and you can play with it on rondo.needle. If you want to export your designs, we do ask for a one-time fee so that we can continue developing it. And we have a ton of ideas on how to make it better, how to add surface options and texturing and all that kind of stuff. So if you can, please support us developing this and have fun exploring it.